The Noah Project.
The Noah Project, a way of grasping and coping with the potential tomorrow by decoding and understanding the many signs and messages from yesterday and their meanings for us today.
The Noah Project, looking above the traditional, beneath the accepted, beyond the norm.
Prophecy and prediction. How far apart these two words seem today. The one, a harbinger of biblical or mythic doom. The other, as current as today's economic barometers. Yet they both mean virtually the same thing. And it's usually a warning. Do we really listen? Rarely.
But what if we had paid attention to the warnings of biologist Rachel Carson about the dangerous use of unrestricted chemicals in our environment? How many listened to visionary Paul Ehrlich and those few others trying to alert us to the potential problems of wildly escalating population growth?
Today, the world's population stands at 5.7 billion and growing. And more of its people go to bed hungry and angry every night than not.
In 1965, Professor Seymour Melman called the United States a depleted society, a society running out of competitive steam, bankrupting its industry in favor of high-rolling military expenditures and woefully lacking moral direction.
Carson, Ehrlich, Melman, just three of the futurists. Another word for prophet, perhaps, who called today's scenario some 30 years ago. Like most prophets, were they without honor in their own land? I'm Joan Miller.
I'm Paul Faberson.
I'm Diane Harris, and this is November of 1994. For the past 3 years, the Noah Project has paid very specific attention to the word convergence, meaning a coming together. From literally thousands of years ago to today's newspaper, and from every corner of the globe, there are an extraordinary number of prophecies, predictions, and warnings that appear to converge on or about the coming year 2000.
Most of us are familiar with the biblical prophecies of Armageddon and a coming apocalypse. Doom and gloom sayers abound, as they always have. Even more so now as we approach the Gregorian year 2000, the second millennium. Many, many times they have been wrong, obviously, but many times they have been right.
Frequently, predictors are wrong only insofar as the timing is concerned. In other words, the event did actually occur as foreseen, just sooner or later than predicted. Much of what has been researched, seen, and heard is not capable of being easily dismissed, although there are always those who will and do.
This is why we've created the Noah Project, to tell in depth the stories that just aren't. We've crisscrossed this country, interviewing men and women whom we and their respective peers believe to be sincere, thoroughly credible professionals. Our intent is to provide them not a soundbite, but rather an opportunity to be as fully and completely heard as possible. We neither prosecute nor defend. We believe that you are wise enough to judge sincerity and authenticity for yourself. Please understand this. It is not our intention to create either fear or panic. Rather, we expect to alert you to certain future possibilities and hope to provide you with perhaps some of the necessary tools to deal with them. This is a story that may change your life, the lives of everyone you know. In fact, life as we know it on this planet.
Can you imagine it? Our world tilting on its axis? Oceans overrunning shorelines? mountains crumbling, continents disappearing beneath the sea as other lands, many the size of continents, rise to take their place. It sounds like a science fiction nightmare, but it's an all too real possibility to this man, Richard Noon, scholar and author of this book, 5/5/2000, the date on which he says, our moon, the planets Mercury, Venus, our sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn will be aligned with the Earth. On that day, the ever-growing ice buildup at the South Pole will upset the Earth's axis, sending trillions of tons of ice and water sweeping over the surface of our planet.
So you've got a chunk of ice larger than the United States and Canada, and it's 2.5 miles high and growing. And the imbalance is that, as you can see on any globe, most of the ice is offset to one side. If the ice were centered equally right around the pole, centrifugal force tugging on that ice wouldn't be as much a problem as it is now with all the ice over here. To put this quite simply, any woman knows if she puts too many clothes in her washing machine, they get lumped on one side, it throws the machine out of kilter. And as you spin a globe, it's quite obvious to see how imbalanced it is. Now, our Earth is constantly turning. Every time it turns, centrifugal force is tugging on that ice, trying to pull that ice toward the equator. Okay? Yeah. Now, I believe, based on about 17 years of research, with enormous help from scientists in various different disciplines, that if the ice continues to grow at its present rate, on May 5th of the year 2000, that rare planetary alignment, including the moon in that, the moon here closest to the Earth, and the planets behind the moon, I believe that will be like the straw that broke the camel's back, setting this ice cap in motion.
Creating what many are calling a pole shift. Is Richard Noon dreaming? If he is, it's a highly populated nightmare. He's joined by scientists, futurists, shamans, cartologists, visionaries, and psychics. And one such visionary is Richard Koeniger, author of several books, including The Ultimate Frontier, a highly prophetic biography published in 1961. Koeniger also created the intentional communities of Stell, Illinois, Adelphi, Texas, and the island of Philadelphia.
How many years do we have before it really goes?
We've got 8 more years.
8 more years.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be 2000.
Right.
And
in May of 2000.
In May 5th, precisely.
Right.
So in 1939, you were given that piece of information.
Right. And I didn't like it.
I'm sure you didn't like it. But I think it's incredible, Richard, that not until a few years ago, even perhaps within a year, has it been possible, by virtue of the computer, to have that model appear and know that the model that you were told in 39 is accurate.
The Earth will be alone on its side of the universe, as far as our solar system is concerned, because even the moon will be on the other side. I mean, lined up
right.
with the sun and all the rest of the planets.
What will, as you see it, or have been instructed, what will signal the real beginning of the shift? It's not going to happen that fast, is it?
Yeah, all of a sudden it'll just happen.
That's it? Mm-hmm. And the whole thing goes up for grabs everywhere. The whole world is turned upside down.
It's a slip of the Earth's crust. I mean, geologists have known about this for a long time. You don't find it in your high school books in geology or anything like that, but in the last 30,000 years, there have been 3 other North Poles. That's in the last 30,000 years. That's, geologically speaking, that's not very long.
James Summers, astronomer and director of the Atlanta Planetarium, Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, on May the 5th of the year 2000, a viewer on the Earth, if they could look past the bright light of the sun in the noontime sky, would be able to see the sun, of course, the new moon with its dark side toward us would be in the sky. Between the Earth and the sun, we would have Venus, and then Mercury, and on the far side of the sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The fact that they are all grouped together in this very small area of the sky as seen from the Earth indicates a basic alignment of all of these objects with the Earth and the sun.
I met Richard Noon when he was doing his research for his book, and at the time he came and asked a colleague of mine if there was anything going on in this particular period of time astronomically that might be significant. And Julius Stahl, who was sort of my mentor, determined that there was this alignment of objects in the year 2000. He calculated their positions basically by hand. Computers like this had not been developed some 15, 17 years ago. The diagram that is in the book 5/5/2000 of the positions of the planets is very much like the position of the interior planets in this particular representation. Corresponds almost exactly, well, as accurately as you can just draw them with a pen.
Can you describe to us what we're looking at on the screen there?
The circles represent the orbits of the planets. This outer one is Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, and then the interior planets are all grouped so tightly together there it's difficult to actually see how basically straight this line is, and it corresponds, as I say, almost precisely to the calculations that were made by hand prior to the publication of the book.
What do you think, an alignment of that nature, and certainly including the moon, what kind of an affect might that have on this planet?
The one that affects us most directly is the moon.
Right.
The fact that the moon is new and in the sky with the sun means that the combined gravitational attraction of the two is significant. Astronomically speaking, we'd probably say that we wouldn't expect much in the way of an effect, but of course never can say when the moon's involved. The major players in the alignment are Jupiter and Saturn, and they align every 18, 19 years. Getting them in there with Mercury and Venus and Mars complicates it somewhat, so that alignments of this number of planets probably occurs every 400 years or so, although it's not a periodic thing. You've got all of these objects that are moving at their own speeds, and speeds that change depending upon where they are in the orbit, and so it's hard to get them all
Right.
together, but this is sort of a unique alignment. I don't know, there would have never been one just like this in the past.
This hasn't happened for perhaps 6,000 or so years, or could it have happened within this interim period?
Well, this particular alignment very likely would never have happened. The statistical probability of getting this number of objects in exactly the same positions, the age of the universe is probably not great enough for this to have happened exactly like this before.
So then it is very, very unique.
This particular one would be unique enough that if you were to make a record of it, astronomers 100,000 years from now could use this information and come back and identify the date of this particular alignment without any question.
Yes, planetary alignments do happen, and many cultures and individuals believe that their occurrence can and does actually influence events here on Earth. But a pole shift? Has that ever happened? Could it ever happen? Well, a lot depends on which side of the geologic fence you happen to be sitting on. The side of uniformitarianism or catastrophism. Adventurer, archaeologist, and author David Childress, who's explored and written about lost cities all over the world.
There are two main schools of geology, and these two schools are opposites. The main school of geology that we're mostly taught is a theory of geology known as uniformitarian geology. The opposite school of geology is a school of geology called cataclysmic or catastrophic geology. In uniformitarian geology, which is typically the geology we're taught in school when we go to high school or college and we're taught geology, that is a theory of slow, gradual geological change. Geological change is uniform in nature, and geological changes happen very slowly over millions of years. The other school of geology, cataclysmic geology, is quite different. In cataclysmic geology, you can have sudden earth changes that happen in a matter of hours rather than millions of years. Volcanoes suddenly go off, huge earthquakes, whole continental land masses are shifted, huge tidal waves and earthquakes move through the land. There's tremendous destruction. The whole climate can be changed very suddenly. This cataclysmic geology is one that is taught in virtually every ancient legend. The Bible, any stories of the flood and earth changes, and worlds before our own will make total sense within a framework of cataclysmic geology. But this is not the geology that we're taught is true. We're taught that this kind of rapid change doesn't occur, and rather all geological change is slow and uniform, and certainly insurance companies would like to believe that that's the case. But the evidence is really overwhelmingly for the cataclysmic geology, sudden earth changes.
Sudden earth changes, say some, but it is the generally reassuring impression of many more scientists that the poles have been in their present locations for probably several millions of years. Yet there is Professor Charles Hapgood, historian, cartographer, and author of maps of the ancient sea kings and the path of the pole. His impressive body of evidence, including radiocarbon datings of climactic events of the last 100,000 years, illustrates the three relative positions of the poles during that period.
Historian Immanuel Velikovsky claimed that the Earth experienced both shiftings of its axis and displacement of its crust. He said that the magnetic poles of the Earth became reversed only a few thousand years ago. And numerous Egyptian papyri tell of the Earth turning upside down. The magical papyrus Harris speaks of a cosmic upheaval of fire and water when, quote, the south becomes north and the Earth turns over.
All over the world, on every continent, in every country, are silent, inscrutable messages from the past, awaiting only the scholar's kiss to awaken us to their meaning. Unfortunately, most of them are still undeciphered and thus still remain a mystery.
It is precisely this element of mystery that makes Richard Noon's ideas and his book 552,000 so compelling. While a surprising number of individuals have and are predicting a polar shift, almost none have been so bold as to predict both the date and the event which would trigger it. Does Richard Noon claim to be a psychic? No. He did his research the old-fashioned way, sifting through clue after clue until, in that ancient, mysterious Great Pyramid at Giza, he may have found a 6,000-year-old telegram addressed to our planet and soon to be opened. This message is in the form of a unique kind of calendar. It appears that measurements of the Great Pyramid have shown a series of breaks and variations built into the twists and turns of its galleries and inner chambers. Some have considered these aberrations to be indicative of events past, present, and future, unbelievable as that may seem. This so-called key to the pyramid was discovered early in our century, and since then, these measurements evidently have predicted critical events which would happen at times that actually did correspond to World War I, the armistice, World War II, the atomic age, and apparently crucial events of the 50s and 70s.
The pyramid incorporates a 6,000-year calendar. This is what led me to the planetary alignment. It incorporates within it a calendar which covers 6,000 years, from 4000 BC, 6,000 years ahead into the future. There's a 6,000-year timeline, and if you're going to have something scientific, you have to have a constant. And in this timeline calendar built into the Great Pyramid, each inch is equal to a year. So you have a line of 6,000 inches, 6,000 years, and each inch represents a year. And it begins in 4000 BC and ends May 5th of the year 2000. On May 5th of the year 2000, the structure will be 6,000 years old. So I said, if the calendar ends in 6,000, what happens then? And the astronomer put it in his computer and brought it up and found that on May 5th of the year 2000, all the major planets in our solar system would be in a straight line across space, including the moon. I had found a rare astronomical event that takes place on the exact day this calendar ends.
And what could that mean, that alignment?
It means that the Earth will be subject to more gravitational pull.
Very heavy pull, wouldn't it, with all of those planets?
Well, with all the
yeah.
planets behind the moon, and of course the moon controls the ebb and flow of the tide twice in 24 hours. So, yes, it means something, but what does the pull of the planets act on? It acts on the massive accumulation of ice that's now growing silently over the horizon, and that ice is ready, willing, and able to end our civilization as it has ended many other super civilizations in the past. And unless we do something about it, we'll all have our careers terminated or greatly altered in another 8 years. Now, as incredible as that sounds, I was led to this theory by Professor Charles H. Hapgood, who wrote this book here, The Path of the Pole. After 23 years of study, Professor Hapgood found that during an ice age, when one or more of the polar ice caps grows to maturity, the rock holding that ice in place gave way for some reason. He wasn't sure why, but he knew it gave way, and what happened at that time was the Earth would, see, here's, let's do it like this. Here's America.
Right.
What Professor Hapgood found is when that ice got too heavy, just like the clothes getting lumped together in a washing machine, the Earth would roll over so that the poles then were at the equator, and a new part of the Earth was where the North and South Pole were. So the Earth itself as a whole does not turn over, but the skin of the Earth, the crust of the Earth, moves as a whole, and there is a massive amount of evidence from Siberia, from South America, Canada, that supports this. The brilliant, absolutely brilliant scientist, Professor Charles H. Hapgood, was the one that did the original work on this. And when he had acquired enough evidence to indicate in his mind that the Earth did shift several thousand miles over long periods of time, he went to someone who could give him, an answer as to whether such a thing was possible. He went to a man whose very name is synonymous with intelligence, Albert Einstein. And with Einstein, it was a matter of physics. With Einstein, it was a simple matter. If you've got a round ball spinning in space, and you've got an offset weight or mass. Einstein was of the same opinion as Hapgood that once the ice volume had reached a certain mass where it would exert 1,700 pounds of pressure per square inch on the rock holding that ice, buttressing that ice now in place against the pull of centrifugal force, once that rock is fractured, then Einstein said this would displace the polar regions toward the equator, which is a very dry, calm-sounding statement. Displace the polar regions toward the equator. But during such a displacement, you would have earthquakes, tremendous earthquakes, maybe 8, 9 on the Richter scale. You would have volcanic activity, tidal waves. As the Earth shifts and seeks a new equilibrium, the winds would rage wildly in tornadoes, hurricanes. I mean, it would devastate most people alive on the surface of the planet.
Could you, as horrible as this might be, how would you envision, just for example, our own country, the United States?
Well, with an Earth movement of that magnitude, most of the cities would be turned into rubble. I would imagine, based on the work that Hapgood did on this, I would think because of the present direction that the ice at Antarctica is offset, I would envision the United States moving south about 2,000 miles.
About 2,000 miles.
Right.
So New York would end up somewhere
south of where it is presently.
It is certainly conceivable to imagine something cataclysmic happening that has never happened before. All lovers will attest to that. But the case for a polar shift is considerably enhanced by those scientists and psychics who believe this to be a recurring event. Louis Agassiz, father of glacial geology, recognized back in 1840 that distinct ice ages occurred. He proposed that the beginning of an ice age was a global catastrophic event accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature. Alfred Wegener, the undisputed first proponent of modern plate tectonics, evidently believed that the change in the Earth's axis took place quickly, probably fast enough to cause extensive flooding as the oceans inundated equatorial lands.
The Sudan Basin, there's all the evidence necessary to realize that there was a heavy weight of ice in that area, and now it's in Africa. The Caspian Sea, I'm trying to think, during Wisconsin glaciation, which was the most recent one, it was Hudson Bay. I mean, that area is still so depressed from the weight that was on it. It's still rebounding, but that's low enough to have the sea cover that area.
So even though there are those who say there must be some other explanation for this, the explanation is that this has happened before.
Right, and fairly frequently.
And fairly frequently. And yet, we're not taught about this at all.
Well, it's terrifying to put kids through stuff like that. Or the fact that there have been other places which have been poles of the Earth, for the accumulation of ice. Obviously, coal in Antarctica indicates that it must have been a lot warmer there at one time, and it doesn't seem too logical that the Earth was so warm that that place was tropical for long periods of time. It slid there somehow or other. But this would be an earthquake that way beyond anything that Richter ever dreamed of in intensity. But it's a pretty bumpy ride as things slide to maybe 1,500 miles to a different position.
Earth changes of this magnitude Seems impossible, doesn't it? But
You can see it every day in your paper. We're now having more tornadoes in one day than we used to have in a year. We're now having more volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, weird weather. Why? Because I'll show you. Here's the book. Let's suppose the book is the plastic viscose underlayment under the crust of the earth, right? If I could borrow your hand.
Sure.
Let's say your hand is the crust of the earth. Now your hand is on that plastic squeezable material under the crust. Now my hand is the ice. And as I press down on your hand, which is the crust, your hand is pressing down on the plastic viscose material underneath, which has got to go somewhere.
So it's going to.
So, well, it's squeezed out from under an area the size of the continent of Antarctica. And when it's squeezed out from under Antarctica, it moves through the Earth's fault lines, and movement in the fault lines causes an increase in volcanic and earthquake activity. Now, you read in the paper, and I'd like to make this point if no other point is made. Today in the paper you read a great deal about the so-called greenhouse effect. Mm-hmm. The Earth is going to warm, the polar ice caps are going to melt and flood low-lying areas. Well, there are two groups of scientists today, and one group, political appointees mainly, are scientists that believe the Earth is warming based on computer models. But you know, if you feed the wrong data into a computer, you're going to get the wrong answer. The pioneers of climatology all are calling for us heading straight into a deep, deep freeze, another ice age. So the way an ice age takes place, if I may, and I did this on the Donahue show, I can do it fairly quickly, as the Earth warms. So as the Earth warms, it warms at the equator. This causes hot, moisture-laden air to rise up from the tropics, where the prevailing wind patterns impressed upon the Earth carry that moisture to the South Pole, where it falls as snow, changing to glacial ice. As the ice sheet at the South Pole increases in size, this causes a flow of cold, dry air at low altitude to rush back to the tropics, which in turn pushes up more hot, moisture-laden air. If you're going to have an ice age, you've got to have a tremendous expenditure of energy to carry moisture to the pole. How else are you going to build ice without getting moisture there? So all of us have seen a conveyor belt. We go to the airport, put our suitcase on it. So it's like a conveyor belt.
Admiral Byrd's towers.
Mm-hmm.
Would you describe that, because that's such a graphic representation just of a minute piece of history?
When Admiral Byrd went there, he constructed a couple of towers. They were 70 feet high, and it didn't take too long for the ice to climb up, and then the towers were 30 feet tall, then 20, then 10, and then they disappeared, buried under the ice.
In the early 1900s, engineer Hugh Auchincloss Brown, after seriously researching the problem of ice buildup at the poles, argued that as a result of these frigid accumulations, the Earth periodically capsized at intervals of about 8,000 years, destroying most of the civilization's extent.
It happens so rapidly because now you have to remember, on one side of the Earth, as that rolled north, the other side rolled south. Okay, and when you go to Canada and Alaska, and you look, whole books have been written on this. Velikovsky wrote Earth in Upheaval, that's one of the better ones, I think. But various other people have written books showing that at this particular time there were mass extinctions of animals. Now you find in Alaska, wherever rivers have carved through the banks, you find hundreds of animals of all different species lumped together in a common grave, as if some godly hand in a universal rage had swept the landscape and plopped these animals together. You find lions and lambs huddling in caves, naturally enemies,
Right.
huddling in a cave from some far greater fear. And then you come south further, you find the entire Pacific Northwest of the United States covered by a lava flow a mile high. Think of that. A lava flow a mile high, coming over mountains and filling valleys. And you go into Mexico and you find the same sort of evidence for extinction. You get to South America and you find seaports with harbors and ports and cities 18,000 feet up in the mountains. That's 8,000 feet above the line of eternal snow. Planes cut on oxygen at 10,000 feet, and yet here, 18,000 feet on the west coast of South America, you find seaports that were on the ocean, but the entire west coast of South America was suddenly thrust up in the air. And all of these events, if you look at the data and carefully examine the data, you see all of these events took place around 6,000 years ago. And when I said the builders of the Great Pyramid were very advanced, one of the ways that you know that is, and one of the ways it ties this earth shift or earth change together with that, is that at that time, 6,000 years ago, someone mapped the entire continent of Antarctica.
The Piri-Reis map.
The Piri-Reis map shows that, and various other ancient maps show that. But before we get into any discussion of the maps, what is important is that to go out and map a continent the size of Antarctica indicates that there was a civilization with enormous resources. They show the lay of the land, the topography of the Antarctic continent. In other words, they show mountains, rivers, free-flowing rivers, and if the continent was not covered by ice, they could have mapped it. If it was covered by a mile or two deep ice, then the only way they could have mapped it is with sophisticated electronic sounding techniques that we used in the International Geophysical Year, 1957-58, to map it. So take your choice. A, they mapped it when the land was not covered by the present ice, which means it wasn't there in its present position, or they had the same sophisticated electronic sounding device equipment that we use today.
While scientists of every discipline debate whether the Earth is in fact warming or cooling, certain ominous facts seem to prevail. The planet apparently suffers long periods of glaciations, ice ages, punctuated by short bursts of warm-ups, such as the period we're now in, and which many see coming to an end. How soon? Depends on whose theories you happen to buy, the uniformitarianists or the catastrophists. If it happened before, as so many believe, it can happen again.
When you look in history books, you always see the woolly mammoth trudging through the snow of the Ice Age. And this is incorrect. A French dermatologist did a microscopic examination of the skin of the woolly mammoth and found it to be identical to the modern-day African or Indian elephant.
So he couldn't possibly have survived.
Average cow would be better adapted to cold than the woolly mammoth because the woolly mammoths or mastodons had no sweat glands. So they wouldn't be out trudging through the snow. These were temperate climate animals that were suddenly moved to Siberia, slammed to the ground, quick frozen, so quickly that coming by thousands of years later, you find these animals perfectly preserved. They even ate some of them at the Explorers Club in New York back in the 30s. And when I say quick frozen, I mean flash frozen.
In an instant.
They found was that the mastodons had apparently died suddenly. They still had fresh flowers and leaves in the mouth, and that the material that they had swallowed was not digested, so that the whole process apparently came to a stop very, very suddenly, suggesting a sudden drop of temperature to 50, 60 degrees below zero in just a matter of, if not minutes, at least hours. Now, where the energy comes from for that is from the fact that the ice mass on Antarctica builds up and gets this thing out of balance. For a long time, geologists who have addressed this particular problem have said, you know, that's not the way the world works. We have continental drift, and the continents move slowly apart, 1 inch per century or some approximate figure like that. And that this goes on slowly and slowly and slowly, and that there's nothing in the geologic record to show a rapid shift. Well, if Hapgood is correct, and in a period of just a few tens of thousands of years, there have been several shifts, those are just momentary little glitches in the geologic history, and you're not going to find it probably in any sedimentary rock layers, because 10,000 years is just an eye blink as far as geology is concerned. And so the geologic evidence is not going to be effective either for or against.
So we've had millions of years of history, and yet our Earth is still a mystery, a planet with no shortage of anomalies. On continents and islands, we've discovered objects, buildings, artifacts, where they presumably shouldn't or couldn't be. Indigenous peoples have knowledge they couldn't or shouldn't have, depending, of course, on which view of Earth's history you espouse. For example, could man and his civilizations be considerably older than most of the currently accepted beliefs? Could there have been civilizations as sophisticated, perhaps more so, than ours? Are many of these artifacts actually specific messages we have only yet to decode?
Could the Great Pyramid at Giza, containing such incredible knowledge in its very dimensions, have been built as an express warning to future generations, thousands of years yet unborn? In fact, specifically to our generation?
Eventually, anyone that has ever examined this evidence has come to the conclusion that the people that built the Great Pyramid were far, far more advanced. And remember, these are our ancestors, our great to the 20th power ancestors, were far, far smarter than the average textbooks give them credit for. I believe that these people were survivors of the last pole shift of the Earth, the last ice age. The last ice age was the Wisconsin Ice Age, which is well documented. It took place about 10,000 years ago, and 10 to 8, right in there. And I believe that they built the Great Pyramid to serve as a time capsule of information.
All around the world are megalithic remains like Stonehenge, Glastonbury, and the Medicine Wheel of Wyoming, to name just a very few, evidence of a fantastic astronomical knowledge that must have been obtained after tens of millennia of observations and recordings. Our ancestors knew that the movements of heavenly bodies affected their world physically and psychically, just as we are aware today of the effect of the sun and moon upon the tides of the sea and the currents of human consciousness. Sophisticated equipment today alerts us to the fact that climatic conditions on the planet are affected by sunspots and the resultant solar winds. What did our ancestors use to give them such incredibly precise data? How could they have projected celestial events like the alignments of the planets thousands of years into the future? An event that was only corroborated within the last several years by specially written computer software.
It becomes more and more obvious as we dig deeper into the earth that there have been many civilizations before this one, and that these civilizations were destroyed, absolutely destroyed, except for a remnant of survivors, hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. And then mankind starts climbing back up again to the state we're at today. Well, it's mainly psychological. Whenever you start discussing, for example, the Great Pyramid, and you describe the knowledge that would have had to have been known, people say, oh, how could they know that back then? But that is an assumption on the part based mainly on out-of-date and antiquated books on history. Most people have the mental conception that 6,000 years ago, man was dressed in leopard skin robes, dragging his old lady home by the hair in this hand, fighting off dinosaurs with this hand. But the Great Pyramid, and also the pyramids of Mexico, Mesoamerica, Chiapas, Guatemala, they all indicate a civilization that existed at one time, approximately 6,000 years ago, that had colonies and traded all over the earth. In my book, I present a wealth of evidence that this was true, and a skeptic once asked me one time, well, why, if there was all this trade and intercourse between the old world and the new, why wasn't it known more? Well, Harvard professor Barry Fell has demonstrated that everyone was over here before Columbus. The Egyptians, the Celts, the Phoenicians. Egyptian stele was found in Oklahoma. There's a tribe up in Canada that wrote with Egyptian hieroglyphs. So when Champollion was trying to decipher the Rosetta Stone, had he known about this tribe of Indians up in Canada, he could have taken the Rosetta Stone to them, and they would have read it right off for him and saved him years of grief and aggravation and stress that eventually killed him. At one time, the ancient city of Troy, Homer's Iliad, was thought to be nothing but a legend until an archaeologist went over and dug up the 7 hills of Troy. And we know now that Troy was a real city inhabited by real people. And times and dates in history are constantly changing, and the farther we go back in history now, the recent archaeological digs, the more perfect the structures and the art are.
Virtually every aspect of the so-called Tomb of Khufu, the Great Pyramid at Giza, seems open to debate and disagreement, starting with the fact that no mummy or regal artifacts were ever found there. When was it constructed? Estimates vary from 4,500 years ago to 6,000, to 10,000 and even before that. Egyptologists generally date it 2,700 to 2,300 BC. The Hollywood version. Thousands of slaves endlessly pulling 2.5 to 5 ton boulders onwards and upwards. Is this correct? Yes, with giant ramps, say some. Not on your life, say others. Jim Hagan, architect and designer of many well-known edifices, including the University of Jordan and Atlanta's transit system, MARTA, where this interview took place.
How do you think that the pyramid was built? Who built it? Do you think, of course, like, do you believe the Hollywood version of thousands?
No, not thousands of people did it. Thousands of people didn't do it. They didn't roll those pieces around. They didn't bring them across the Nile on bulrush rafts, or else you'd find a lot of those pieces at the bottom of the Nile. See, that's because I've tried to load boats before and shove off, and it doesn't work with big pieces of rock and all that.
So what's your feeling about it? What you thought about it?
Well, it wasn't built by anybody that we know, and it wasn't built by any method that we Well, my theory is that it is a machine. It has none of the items that you would find in what we call a building. It has those things that you'd find in a machine, like a battery or an engine or something like that.
Can you describe that a little further, Tim? How do you mean by that?
Well, it has no doors, has no windows, has nothing of human scale. There is not one. There are a few openings that just happen to be big enough for you to walk through and so forth, but it's no indication that there was ever a door there or anything like that. It's just not that sort of thing. It's not typical of any of the tombs that have been. I mean, I've been to tomb sites and I've seen what tombs are, and tombs are like houses. You know, they're rooms with stuff in them, like you were getting ready to go somewhere. And this isn't that way at all.
So what is your inference?
I think it was something like a battery. Something like a storage battery. It's like in your flashlight or in your car.
Lee Richmond Donahue, author, anthropologist, and futurist.
No, I don't know the predictions of the pyramids, but I do know that they were a power structure.
As a solar tap.
As a solar tap, yes. My explanation of that, it was set up, all the pyramids were set up within 30 degrees outside the equator, which was the place where they would be the most optimum as power taps.
92-year-old Wilfred J. Gregson, founder and past president of the American Institute of Registered Architects, and a world-acclaimed authority on the subject of Freemasonry.
The manufacture and the design of the pyramid shows extraordinary knowledge and ability to be able to cast or build a huge stone edifice with a shaft opening that would look at a certain star requires extraordinary care, extraordinary knowledge that we don't I don't know that we have. We could possibly do it, but we'd have use a whole bunch of computers. They did it with no computers, just straight thinking.
Richard Noon.
The blocks came from quarries, some at the site and some from as far away as 500 miles up the Nile. The King's Chamber itself is composed of blocks of granite that weigh as much as a modern-day train engine.
So how would they
get him 45 stories up in the air?
How would they get him there first?
Well, they had to get him there, and it's been put forward that they floated him down the Nile on rafts, which is quite difficult. It must have been an enormous raft. And yet, in the King's Chamber, the focal point of that chamber, which is in the mass centroid, that's a fancy way of saying the middle of the building, there is this brown granite with a high quartz content box. And scholars have shown that the Ark of the Covenant would fit perfectly within that box. And this box sits on the exact center of this entire structure.
So there has to be a meaning to this. Doesn't seem possible not to.
Even the design of the King's Chamber, the room is designed to protect this box.
What about, for example, if you were given, say, unlimited funds, and unlimited access to incredible, bright, and talented people, would you duplicate the Pyramid of Giza?
No, not piece by piece. You could build something that came very close in our vernacular or our technology, but you couldn't do it piece by piece. You couldn't build the same thing.
Does that mean, are you saying that there's a possibility that this could have been, first of all, created by an intelligence that wasn't on Earth at that time, or that came to Earth?
It's not even on Earth today. There's not that intelligence on Earth today. I mean, this building right here is nowhere nearly as complicated as the pyramid to do. And it was $50-something million.
How did they make those stones so that they fit as perfectly as they did?
There's no way to do it today, much less in those days.
Thousands of years and incredible technologies later, and it still couldn't be duplicated. This awesome fact has led some serious investigators to suggest that the Great Pyramid could not have been erected, 1, without the aid of computers, 2, the presence of super beings using laser beams to cut and form the 2.5 to 5 ton perfectly fitted blocks, and 3, anti-gravity devices to raise them.
The perfection, everything balances, everything works, everything fits, doesn't it?
Right. And they're different shapes. It's not like it's a mass-produced place. It's just almost every piece is a custom piece, is a custom fitted piece. That's why I think Giza's one of a kind. Giza is one like I've never seen. The others have similarity. The others look in the same family, but
Mathematicians and scientists claim that in Giza's very structure and foundation are incorporated mathematical principles which were presumably not discovered until 2,000 years later, some of them within the last 50 years. Others believe its unique dimensions, both exterior and interior, bear prophetic witness to all major historical events, past and future. Many find solid evidence for its place as a celestial observatory and geodetic marker on which the geography of the Earth and stars have been incredibly charted. A stone symbol of planetary catastrophe, a solar tap, part of a planetary grid using the sun's free energy, or the storehouse of a universal system of weights and measures which record the length of the year, the speed of light, and the orbit of planets with total accuracy. While most modern Egyptologists see only a tomb, uninhabited at that, there are many who join with Richard Noon in recognizing that the Great Pyramid is a message whose time to be heard and understood has finally come.
Throughout history, it has drawn men to it.
Right.
We discovered our universal form of measurement, feet and inches, from it. And throughout history, it has taught astronomers. When Greaves studied it and came up with this unit of measurement, feet and inches, Isaac Newton had his theory of gravity, but he couldn't publish it because he didn't have any universal form of measurement. So the measurements obtained by the English mathematician John Greaves in the 16th century, that in turn allowed Newton to publish his theory of gravity. So in a lot of ways, it's been like a time capsule, and as man obtains and climbs up to the state of knowledge that the builders of this structure had, they have slowly learned many things from this structure. Now, to me, the way my mind works is I thought, well, if there was this very, very advanced civilization having a knowledge of electricity and hydraulics and engineering.
How do we know that, Richard, that they had a knowledge of electricity? What do you infer?
There, in my book, 552,000, I present some pictures of what are called the Baghdad batteries. These were strange clay objects with copper rods in them, and they were put in a museum and called religious objects. But it wasn't it was after World War II that an engineer for General Electric was visiting, and he found these objects, and he said these are electric cells. And with the addition of fruit juice, I like to joke on it, with the addition of citric acid, these will produce electricity. And a chain of them put together will produce, of course, more electricity. And in some of the finest examples of Egyptian jewelry, you can see that the jewelry was electroplated. Yes. And so why are we so vain that we think we're the best that civilization's ever had to offer?
You say that in your book that the engineers of the pyramid were the Hyksos.
That's right. Broken down, that means shepherd kings, rulers of foreign countries. These were people that came into Egypt, and by better methodology, which is the way life ought to be anyway, we ought to teach by example. By better methodology, they showed the people train the people that were in Egypt and occupying Egypt at that time, and utilized the people there to build this enormous structure which we call the Great Pyramid. You must remember that throughout human history there have always been two groups of people, the ignorant and the educated. And just as there are today, there are still tribes out in the jungles that are living in very, very primitive conditions, and yet we've walked on the surface of the moon. And that is true, and people forget this, throughout history. There have always been a group of very, very advanced people coexisting with a multitude of people on Earth.
Very primitive.
We're talking about the Masons.
So did
The Secret Society of Freemasons.
Society.
Are the Freemasons that constructed the pyramid, the progenitors of this
I
group?
would think so, because modern speculative Freemasonry developed out of ancient craft masonry, which was the ancient building guild. Now, in ancient times, the secrets of architecture were kept secret.
These were the mystery schools.
These were the mystery schools. And the reason they were kept secret is because knowledge was something that protected you from the despot or cruel king or prince or tyrant. So if the ruler wanted his palace and his highways built, then he had to go to this particular group, you see, because they, and they alone, had the knowledge of building techniques of archaeology. So whoever constructed this thing had a knowledge of astronomy, geodesy, mathematics, and then something happened. And all this knowledge fell down to where, around 2600 BC in ancient Egypt, we find a loss of this, and the knowledge, some of it, through secret societies and in ancient libraries, percolated down to what became the Greeks and then the Romans, and then this knowledge came back up to the present day, where we again are acquiring this knowledge. I always wondered, well, if it was used as a telescope, what did it point at? And when I was researching this book, I found that approximately 6,000 years ago, for a year or so, the Earth had two suns.
Really?
Yes, there was a supernova explosion, which is where a star blows up and collapses in on itself. Vela X, yes. Mm-hmm. And it was very unique in that this star exploding, which burnt like a second sun for a year, perhaps two, exploded within a triangle of 3 stars. And of course, modern day masonry is rampant with symbols of a triangle and, you know.
Was Herodotus a Mason?
In 440 BC now, he wrote this. He said, I am well aware of these secret mysteries, but I am not at liberty to describe them.
That certainly implies that he was a member of that fraternity, does it not?
Right, it implies that quite well. And throughout history, 16 presidents of the United States have been members of the Secret Society of Freemasons. It was quite a shock to me to learn that free speech, the free public school system, and the freedom to worship whatever religion you want to are all gifts of this ancient fraternity, because the Constitution of the United States was written by Freemasons. Washington, all his generals were Freemason. When Washington laid the cornerstone of the White House, he put in full Masonic regalia. And if you look further back in history, you find that strange Freemason, Colonel James Churchward, who wrote a whole series of books on the lost continent of Mu.
Oh, yes.
And in his books, he describes what he calls a magnetic shift of the Earth, and shows the Earth, in essence, rolling over And he wrote those books back in the 18th century. And the continent of Mu that he described was not discovered until about 20 years ago, which, you know, the discovery that there was a continent in the Pacific that sank below the waters. This was discovered by a joint project between American scientists and scientists in Israel. Dr. Amos Noor was, I think, you know, the head of the American team. And they said that the discovery of the Pacific plate makes that area of the world consistent with the rest of the Earth's plates. I kept bumping into the secret society all through history. And to me, it was just incredible that any one group had been around and survived for that long.
Wilfred J. Gregson.
One thing that always has bothered me, still bothers me, here we have the pyramids that were built to gain certain knowledge. Why has nobody gone into this anymore? Why have they let it drop with the Egyptians? It seems to me that somebody's missing the boat. As scientists, they study everything under the sun, and they've just neglected that. Another thing about it, if a pyramid has 4 lines at 90 degrees, so as a cone built at 90-degree angle, seems to me should have a greater effect even than the pyramids had. Nobody's ever built it. Why not? Why has nobody ever set to work to find out what was it that the Egyptian priests were trying to get when they built the pyramid?
There is no doubt in your mind that the Great Pyramid is a metaphysical tool. Or was intended to be that.
Well, they intended that. Matter of fact, let's consider the 3 mock-ups, we call them, the little buildings they built. They built one at 90 degrees, the one which they finally destroyed, and one just a little less than 90 degrees, one a little more than 90 degrees, and then they would test to see which one had the greatest effect. It would have a psychic effect, a spiritual effect, electronic effect, not polar electricity, but static electricity. They were anxious to see which had the greatest, and it was based on that they built the actual pyramid itself. They had reason that it should be there, but they wanted to check it to see that it was there.
Who are the they? What people are we speaking of now?
Priests of the temple.
The priests, right.
The initiates at the temple.
The priests?
We might say they were Freemasons at that time.
Definitely an elite group of extraordinary men. Are these
great thinkers?
All men.
Right. There may have been ladies, I don't know.
Somehow I think so. Well, I certainly wouldn't rule them out either, but all we really know about in this case are the men. But certainly we're talking about a group of individuals who were extraordinarily gifted.
Yes.
They were gifted beyond the purvey of most ordinary individuals of the time.
Right.
In other words, their gifts were not just only intellectual, but they had gifts of evidently certain powers. They had abilities.
Certain powers by being students of certain subjects. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
It was well-known knowledge among students as well as almost everybody that you could raise yourself up to that certain state of knowingness, but you couldn't stay there. The pyramid was built to try and find out if it was possible to get you to stay at that point, and was fairly successful in as much as the ones I mentioned, Pythagoras, Pliny, Porphyry, Plato, all of them had reached that point.
I want to make sure that I understand you correctly.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that this building was built,
this pyramid
was built so and set up within itself in a way, both in the exterior and the interior, to bring an individual or an initiate into contact with the universal one.
Correct.
And a form of awakening that would remain constant, a constant state.
It was an attempt to make constant a condition that you could get to occasionally, with great difficulty, might say, but nevertheless enough to realize that it was there, that they were anxious to extend that period of time that you could stay there.
So that you could, to put this in modern terms, in essence, by going in there and becoming whatever it was that you were to become, you could literally plug in to the infinite.
Well, I don't, whether you would literally plug into the infinite would plug into you.
Architect Jim Hagan.
How old is that form, that pyramid form? Do we know?
It's the oldest.
The oldest. Do you agree?
It comes from pouring a sand out of your hand, and whatever that slope is. It's the oldest.
Do you agree with Richard that it was built 6,000 plus years ago as
No,
opposed
at
to,
least.
and even perhaps earlier?
Perhaps much earlier. There's not one speck of evidence as to the time that it was constructed.
Why do you think that so much lore of Egyptologists for so many years pegs that building at 3,000 something and as the tomb of Khufu? Why do they continue to perpetuate what really so many other people feel is a mythology? Just the concept.
Information management.
Either disinformation or orthodoxy
It's a
dies
Watergate
hard.
scandal.
Yeah.
Nilegate scandal.
Nilegate scandal. That's wonderful.
Richard Noon began researching his book 552,000 in the early 70s. It was first published in 1982. At that time, a majority of scientists called him and his theories loony, wild, and unworthy of serious consideration. Since then, the steady drip, drip, drip of corroborative evidence has caused more than a few to change their minds. The growth of the ice sheet at the pole is virtually unmistakable. And Noon is far from the only one to see ice as the so-called trigger mechanism, nor is he the only one by far to predict a polar shift. From scientists to psychics, the list is both long and varied. Our planet is undergoing cataclysmic changes that have been predicted in the past.
Edgar Cayce, perhaps the 20th century's greatest psychic, predicted a series of Earth changes, many of which have occurred, many of which have not. To this question posed during a reading in 1936, question: what great change, or the beginning of what change, if any, is to take place in the Earth in the year 2000 to 2001 AD? Edgar Cayce replied, when there is a shifting of the poles, or a new cycle begins. August 11th, 1936. In 1979, former political columnist turned psychic author Ruth Montgomery wrote of an axial shift that will, according to her guides, occur in the twinkling of an eye as the Earth slurps approximately onto its side.
Author and psychic researcher Dolores Cannon, whose 2 volumes, Conversations with Nostradamus, have delivered stunning new insights into the 16th century seer's predictions.
All right, this is a map of the United States as it will appear after the pole shifts, after the traumatic shift of the Earth, whenever the polar caps have melted and all of the water has moved down over the United States. Now, when we first began this, we had in the book where different people were shown what the world was going to look like by Nostradamus. As the pole shifts, it's going to shift backward a quarter of a turn. This will create the polar ice caps melting. And when this happens and the water melts down, comes rushing down, the whole plates of the Earth will move. And they will come to a point when they can't move any further. It's like a blockage. Then they will begin to buckle. This is what he said would happen to the center part of the United States. The plates would buckle against each other. The center portion would be forced up as much as 2,000 feet. Therefore, making this portion remaining, because parts of Kansas are very low. And it would put it as high as some of the mountains in Colorado. This is why the normal mechanics, according to the atlases and geography books, they won't hold true. That's what a lot of people want to know, is when this is going to happen. And in the sequel, there was an entire chapter devoted to finding the date of the shift. And we did it by taking one quatrain and peeling it like an onion. It had so many layers of definition to it. And then we give it to 3 different astrologers because it was full of astrological signs. We found the reason why it has never been interpreted before was because of a mistake in the original French translation, that no one has ever interpreted it before to get the astrological signs. So 3 different ones working at it. The date seems to be 2029. Another one came up with a date of 2011 and another one of 2002. But it's a possibility the earlier dates could be events in this third war because it also had something to do with nuclear. But it's definitely after the next century begins. And Nostradamus said, as long as it's happening now, slowly we can adapt to it. And it is happening. The changes in the weather patterns, the volcanic eruptions, they've gone 200 and 600 years and not erupted. And the earthquakes, the intensity of the hurricanes, it's all part of the changing weather patterns due to the shift as it's gradually occurring. As long as it's doing it this way, we can adapt to it, we can deal with it. He says if it happens traumatically, that's where we're in trouble. That's where the tidal waves, the tremendous upheaval happens. And one of the things he wanted us to know that could cause it to happen traumatically would be these nuclear power plants that we have built on top of earthquake zones. If they are triggered, it will create more impetus to cause it to shift more dramatically. That's what he wanted to warn us about.
Today, this scenario seen and rendered by Gordon Michael Scallion, the well-documented and highly reputable psychic futurist, comes awesomely close to the visions of the I Am America group, to the prophecies of Sun Bear and Wabun Wind, to the revelations of No Eyes, through the writings of Mary Summer Rain. Ancient Jewish prophets foretold Armageddon. Tibetan Buddhists prophesied the end of Buddhism itself after the 13th Dalai Lama was dethroned. He is. Hindus believe annihilation of the human race comes at the end of the Kali Yuga, a time now coming to a close, and the list goes on.
From the Aboriginals, with a history dating back over 40,000 years, to the Mayans, to indigenous peoples all over our planet, to our own Native Americans, the voice of prophecy, though in different languages, appears to sing the same note.
These predictions from the past and those being predicted today coincide with awesome similarity. Author and psychic healer Greta Woodrue, who has been shown a scenario almost too terrifying to relate. From 1987 to 1991, Mother Mary spoke to this non-Catholic Texas woman, Annie Kirkwood, a former nurse. The publication of Mary's Message to the World in 1991 contained future predictions and a philosophy of beingness that resonated with religious and non-religious alike all over the world.
When you first heard inside your head, right? Mm-hmm. A voice telling you what to begin. Did it say?
It said, Annie, I want you to take this message down that I want to give to the world. And I laughed because I thought it was funny. You know, I couldn't. I didn't believe it. I mean, I didn't know who it was. So when I asked her, I said, this was Mary, Mother of Jesus. And she had a message for the world, and she wanted to give it through me. And my first reaction, of course, was, I'm not Catholic. And I kept saying that, you know, I don't want to do this. I'm not Catholic. And
did you say this out loud, or did you say this in your head? I mean, in an empty room, you're saying
out loud, in an empty room, out loud. Yes, I don't want to do this. I'm not Catholic. I know you must have the wrong person. I hear the words in my mind. It's like mental telepathy. I hear the words, and I just take down what I hear. I type the words that I hear, and it's almost, I get into a rhythm as I hear the word and I'm typing it. And it flows. It seems to flow from my mind through my fingers.
The message is, in part, kind of scary.
Very scary. Very, very scary. I had a really tough time with the predictions. The predictions were given throughout the whole 2-year period, or it was almost 2 years, that we received these messages or these daily lessons, and because I could not take the predictions, but just a drop at a time, she would give one, and then we'd continue to talk about love, or we'd talk about her life with Joseph, or whatever the discussion was that day.
So when you sat down and you looked at a manuscript in which the predictions were enumerated,
I didn't want them included.
One after another.
No, I didn't want them included. Not at all. They're too scary.
But you did include them, exactly as they were given to you, didn't you?
Because every decision that was made, I would go and ask Mary about it. And I asked her, can we leave the predictions out? She said, no, they're part of the message. They are there to give validation to my message. Because as the things begin to happen, as my predictions begin to come true, people will take notice. And then we'll look to see what it is that they can do to prepare and what my real message is.
What is her real message?
Her real message is that we need to make peace with ourselves. We need to make peace with our Creator. We need to love, to forgive. We need to settle all these old issues that we've been carrying around with us through lifetimes. And really, I think it comes down to forgiveness. Forgive ourselves. Forgive others.
When Mary speaks of the earth changes and the volcanoes, the hurricanes, the fires, the floods, and then eventually the shifting of the poles themselves, the tilting of the world on its axis, is she saying, and is she conveying, because she says that she too is a messenger. Mm-hmm. So you and Mary have a great deal in common. You are both messengers of another source, of a final source. She speaks of these things as events for which man is not going to be punished. This is not a punishment, is it?
No, this is not a punishment. It's not a punishment, although we have caused a lot of it because of the pollution, because of our ways of life, and because we don't take care of our home. It really struck me when I started thinking, where can I go? Where can we go to get away from all of this? But then when I realized it was worldwide, we can't leave this planet. We have to ride it out. This is our home. This is the only place that we have to live.
Psychic Maxine Jones.
Are the poles obviously then going to shift?
Yeah, they're going to shift. It's already shifting, and it's going to shift like this. You're not going to flip all the way upside down, but there's going to be a twist and then a turn. And that's what's going on. It's not going to continue all the way over. There'll be a change. It's not quite predicted because it's going to, you don't see the influences that are coming, and they're coming from another direction shortly, and they'll twist it this way. And so it won't be a whole spin, as far as we can see. Oh, there won't be major chaos. No, there won't need to be major chaos because it's not going to all happen all at one time. It's going to happen gradually. It already has happened gradually. Is there major chaos on the earth now? Yes, absolutely. You are in absolute turmoil and major chaos, and you've absorbed it all, and life continues on, and death continues on, and transition continues to happen. The earth can absorb all change, just as a human being can absorb change. It's just change.
Psychic and paranormal investigator Lynn Gardner.
Your planet will exist. Your planet is very much more healthy than many of you recognize. And though its plates, as spoken of by many, are shifting, and there will be certainly that of what you call humans, earthquakes and volcanoes and disruptions to land masses, and that which has been borders before, that will change. This has occurred many times in the history of your planet. It is that balancing the planet has to do for itself, and it is that mechanism the divine has given to it for itself, just as you have given yourself a way to balance yourself when you are out of balance.
All over the planet, men and women following these predictions and their seeming path of accuracy have asked the same question. Where is it safe? Is there a place to hide?
This map shows when Nostradamus saw the world at its worst, when all the water had come down. Now he said after a few hundred years, the solar caps will again form ice, and they will recapture the water. At that time, a lot of this land will be reclaimed and will begin to go down. But I think it's important to know, I get lots of mail and phone calls from people wanting to know, where should I go? And I don't want the responsibility of telling them where to go. He said, you will know within yourself where you're supposed to be. And I tell people that you'll be where you're supposed to be when it happens. Somehow you will know. And it wouldn't do me any good to tell them to go to a certain place. A lot of people in our area here in Arkansas said they've come here from all over the country. They felt a compulsion to come here even without knowing about any of this. But a lot of this, if we go along and do like we're supposed to, it could happen gradually. People would naturally gravitate to the higher elevations and where they're supposed to be. And it may not be traumatic. As he showed us the worst, with the walls of water, the huge tidal waves coming in, the ground splitting open with the earthquakes. But this is at its, the most where it's flooded the most.
I certainly wouldn't want to be on the San Andreas Fault 55-2000.
The voices of change differ only on when and why. Many believe our treatment of the Earth and each other will bring us to planetary catastrophe. Others believe this too may be true, but that whatever the reasons, it has all happened before.
Richard Keenenger.
Yes, it has happened before. Human beings either learn or don't learn, depending upon how you want to look at it. But civilizations tend to last about 200 years as a rule. And Western civilization entered this new phase of civilization, which was pretty much defined by the U.S. Constitution, because that idea spread rapidly, and then industrialization into a whole new era of production and availability of goods to everyone at a reasonable price. That, I say, has been going on for about 200 years, and people are striving at the beginning of things like that. They're working together, making things work. They're enthusiastic, they're idealistic, and then people lose, they seek comforts and security and are willing to trade almost anything for the security. And that essentially is the death knell of that civilization. And it goes over and over and over. It goes on and on. Yeah. You know, where money lies and who's going to make money and who's going to borrow money at interest, and that's what seems to make the world go round, but not in directions which are beneficial to mankind as a whole. That's why it was said that the only way that the world really will be saved is by a worldwide cataclysm during a reapportionment of the world's land masses, shuffling the continents, as you were, from one part of the globe to another relative to the poles and the equator, that would essentially destroy the whole system. And we would be reduced to a Stone Age existence again, because monetary systems would fall apart, credit systems would fall apart, access to raw materials worldwide simply wouldn't exist any longer. We'd be lucky enough to find anything that we could live by just locally. So that scheme will be destroyed essentially by the cataclysm at the turn of the century.
So many believe that the dark shadows that appear to be overtaking us are of our own making. Dr. Jean Houston.
Well, I think a lot of it is surely is our own fault, that we have intervened with patterns of nature that no human being to our knowledge has ever intervened with before. I think the issue is one that we have the powers of second Genesis, Faustian-like powers, and yet we're educated for about the year 1875.
The inevitabilists, going back thousands of years, and including most indigenous peoples, believe this coming planetary catastrophe is our destiny. In the words of Gaboo Ted Thomas, an Aboriginal elder,
we're going to have tidal waves. We're going to have earthquakes. That's coming. Because we don't consider this land as our mother. We've taken away the balance and we're not putting it back. We've interfered with the universe, with Mother Earth.
In one tribal member's interpretation of the Hopi prophecy.
When I was a boy, down in the field, my fathers say someday the earth would turn around, turn over. He say, when that happen, that be the purification day. The sky get black and we be crawling around just like ants. Can't see things come. Like lots of airplanes block the sun and drop lots of kind of like rain. There be those four: rain, earth turning over, ocean coming up, and thunder. It happened all over earth to all peoples.
From interpreters of that incredibly sophisticated Mayan calendar of 26,000 years comes the belief
the 26,000-year cycle may be coming to an end or to a peak, a 13,000-year midway point that signifies a critical turning point.
The Kahunas, sacred teachers of Hawaii, say that during the major changes, all the volcanoes in the Pacific Ring of Fire will erupt.
The Maori people of New Zealand say that the volcanoes in their homeland will once again become active in the time of the changes.
The Kogi Indians of the Sierra Madre jungles believe themselves chosen to be the older brothers to all mankind. Convinced of a nearing worldwide catastrophe, they've stopped spinning wool and weaving cloth, but they maintain the belief that they will preserve mankind after the coming world disaster.
Those who believe cataclysmic disaster is inevitable are found all over the world. Yet others, many of them scientists, believe something can be done, if only.
Several scientists, Irving Kaplan for one, a brilliant scientist in San Diego, California, has already advanced some papers that discuss ways to change the direction of ocean currents and ways to prevent a coming ice age, including remineralizing the soil, which stimulates plant growth. And, you know, there are various things that are possibilities to prevent another ice age. Yet, on the other hand, the first priority, as I see it, is to let people know that there is a problem.
Engineer John Hamaker's book, The Survival of Civilization, published in 1982, offers a brilliantly clear portrayal of the three problems he believes threaten our very existence: carbon dioxide, investment money, and population. Hamaker's concepts of why and how to remineralize the earth in order to stop the impending ice age have finally begun to seep into both the public and scientific consciousness. Is our government listening?
There are those who say our thoughts, both negative or positive, can change this planet. Laughable? Witness Hitler. Stalin, Mao, or Freud, Marx, Einstein, just in our own time. For most of us, the ultimate question is, as it has always been, hope and a question of survival.
Dr. Jean Houston, internationally known psychologist, scholar, author, philosopher, teacher, and pioneer in the human capacities movement.
The messages of ecology, of relationship, of the rise of the spiritual depths, and we are in the last days of an old order. We are in the last days of the Middle Ages, in a sense. And last days, as I say, assert themselves, they assert their authority with a great deal of power and devastation, because it is their last days. Now the point is, can we get past the last days without trashing the new days, you know? And I think these are the very great issues of our time. We are in very tentative, vulnerable times. And we are at the breakdown of virtually everything. Standard brand, cultures, religions, government, ways of being, because we are also in jump time, jump phase time, phase breakout into literally a new order of reality. And I am, as you say, optimistic enough to believe that this new order is coming upon us very, very fast, but with a great deal of acceleration of the breakdown of the old order. It's the first time it has happened globally, as far as we know.
As far
and
as
that's
we
what
know,
makes
yes.
it, and it's the first time that everybody is aware of
yes.
all of it happening simultaneously at the same time. It has a simultaneity, an intensity, and a density of experience, and it's affecting virtually every person's life on this planet. That's a first. Everybody has it, and nobody knows what to do with it.
Yeah.
And that's why we're in high haunt. I mean, people are feeling the hound of heaven. Woof, 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 you know, every morning. Get on with it, get on with it. These are the times, and we are the people. And as Hillel said 2,000 years ago, if not now, when? If not you, who? Well, really, that is true. And everybody is feeling tremendously responsible and response-able to these kinds of questions. So I believe that we are deeply responsible for the earth changes, and that this, at the same time, let's look at the positive side. Since we have seen the whole earth from outer space, since we were born out of the womb of our mother, we came back to her as her partner. And it's interesting that the whole notion of the whole brain, of the whole psyche, the whole world, the word holistic, you know, which is such a buzzword, has come along at the same time that we've had the sense of the whole earth. People are in high haunt. I mean, everywhere I go, people are haunted by what they must be, what they can be, what they have to do to change themselves to be able to be adequate stewards of their society and community. Every old way of being is broken down. People are desperate, not just for meaning, but for new ways of being, so that, as I say, they can be full custodians of this new earth process. So it is happening. So it's as if we are at that credible crossroads between all the opportunities that are here in the dynamic now and a world that is a world of utter devastation, or a world that is a world of utter possibility. And it is in these last years of the 20th century and the beginning years of the 21st that we will profoundly make the difference as to whether we love or perish, as to whether we will grow or die.
Dr. Gay Gare Luce, spiritual teacher, author, and founder of Nine Gates Mystery Schools.
This is a time of major change, and it's happening so fast that I don't think we can begin to comprehend it. Every day now is encompassing the kind of changes that used to take months, if not years. And we need only look at global events. Look at what has happened since the Cold War ended. And we have had to face the enemy within us instead of out there. In addition, the Earth is changing. What we've discovered is that meteorologically, we don't understand weather. We have a very small snapshot of it in time, you know. And there are many predictions about huge earth changes. Undoubtedly they're going to happen, but we don't know where. You know, and many of the predictions and some of their ominousness, I believe, have to do with what's in the collective unconscious rather than what's actually out there. I think there's a new way of living coming about. The breakdown that we feel in our country now is, I think, going to be fairly short-lived. It'll be painful, not as painful as Northern Europe. Economically, I think we're going to come into a time of much greater abundance, but it'll be very different. I think the abundance will be spread through the communities so that there can be much more harmony and much more tolerance for difference, so that people who in fact come from different ethnic backgrounds can maintain some of their culture and their stability while at the same time living next door to people who are really different. We are a part of the solution, and we are part of the creation. It's a holographic universe, and what we think is consequential, and that's, I think, probably at another stage of evolution for all of us. I think as people get older, maybe I'm saying this because I'm noticing this now, as I get older, I notice that I'm more aware of my thoughts and the quality of my thoughts. And I stop myself when I start seeing that I'm thinking something negative, because I understand that there isn't a thought I have that doesn't affect this larger whole that we're living in. And I'll tell you how I know that, because most people say, oh, well, how could you possibly do that? Not only are people telepathic, but they screen it out. Everybody knows what you think. But the fact is that I notice in my life those things that I have thought about a lot, especially in a negative way, have always come to face me again in another form. I have always been confronted with those things again and again until I stopped that thought pattern. And whatever I do, it's like a hall of mirrors. If I look at my life, what I think and do, I've discovered, always comes to face me. It's not an accident. The pattern of my life is just exactly what I have been generating. Now I'm old enough to be a little bit more aware of what I'm generating. I have no interest in generating something that's negative. So when I catch myself judging something or coming down on something, I stop and I ask forgiveness, because forgiveness and blessing something is what undoes the curse of negativity. When you bless something and give it your love, that's the only thing that can loosen the hold of the contracted negativity. Negativity tends to contract us, and positive thoughts tend to expand us. And I think that's very simple.
I was going to say, it is that simple.
Richard Keenenger.
Whatever it is, it's not easy to say it because most people don't want to hear it, and that's unfortunate. We have to band together. If you don't find other people to help protect you, do the things that you can't do, then there's very little that you can do by yourself. I mean, you're just kind of cast adrift. It's one of the reasons why people come together in community, why people stockpile. Find one another. Build something which will help preserve you and your children and your dreams and civilization. And do it for civilization's sake, if not for your own. You're worthy. Most people say, I couldn't do that, or I don't have enough skills. But that's really not true. Everybody has a great deal to give. And energy, goodwill, those are precious commodities in any group activity. And you find love for one another. I'm not talking about sexual love. I'm talking about the love that brothers have for brothers and children have for their parents and parents for their children. And you can extend that to everybody. All those who work together. You become a team. And that's what built this country in the first place, was teamwork. Working together on farms, raising barns together, building a new industry, building bridges. Those are the kinds of things that people love to do when it's meaningful, when it counts. And to do something which is greater than anything you could do on a common, everyday, mundane level. Those are the things that dreams are made of. And it's fun. Do it. But you don't have much time to think about it. You have to think very carefully, very quickly, what you're going to do before it's too late to have the wherewithal to do anything. That's what I would say to people.
Form the family.
Form the family, right. And an extended family.
We're all in it together. And that's what we really have to know, isn't that true?
Yeah, and it always seems to be disasters which bring people together. But this has to be a pre-disaster bringing together, because you won't have time or the capability when everything comes tumbling down.
Thank you. Well, I guess as we heard as children, and now we're going to see as adults, Humpty Dumpty is more than a myth.
I think that sometimes we all get so wrapped up in making a living that, like the old saying, you don't take time to smell the roses. But a wonderful thing up here happens. Life is so calm and wonderful and gentle and marvelous, and the ever-changing seasons, spring, summer, winter, fall, that you get a real sense of living life and enjoying it, and yet at the same time, you're eventually you become overwhelmed with the sense of mystery that surrounds us all. And when you develop this sense of mystery and an awareness that we're surrounded by the tiniest speck of dust on the floor is a mystery. And when you realize that you're living in a mystery, then it makes it quite exciting, especially when you've had a lot of these ironclad thoughts that you were brought up with. When you've examined them closely and they shatter into dust and blow away with the breeze because they have no substance to support them, then the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know. And to me, that makes life an even greater mystery and a greater adventure.